There's a quiet kind of power that most people underestimate. Not the power of persuasion, not the power of words, but the power of silence. Especially when you're dealing with someone who avoids intimacy, someone who runs when things feel too real. If you've ever been in love with an avoidant, you know how disorienting it can feel. One moment, they pull you in with tenderness. The next, they vanish into thin air as though the closeness you shared never existed. It leaves you confused, overthinking, and often blaming yourself. So what do? Most of us chase. We explain. We try to reason. We defend ourselves, hoping that if we just pour out enough love, they'll finally stay. But here's the shocking truth. The more you chase, the further they run. The more you explain, the more pressure they feel. And so you get caught in this exhausting cycle of pursuit and retreat, love and withdrawal, closeness and distance. But what if I told you that the way to make an avoidant crave your presence isn't by doing more, it's by doing less? What if the most magnetic thing you could offer wasn't another heartfelt explanation, or another promise of unconditional love, but silence? Not silence as a weapon, not silence as manipulation, but silence as a declaration of your worth. Silence that says, I don't need to fight for love that's unsure of me. Silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. In this journey, we're going to explore 7 silent moves that shift everything in your connection with an avoidant. These aren't tricks. They aren't games. They're ways of reclaiming your power, your energy, and your peace. They're about stepping out of the exhausting role of chaser and allowing your stillness to do the work for you. Because here's the paradox. The less you try to hold on, the more they start to notice. The less you push, the more they feel the void you leave behind. And that void, that silence, is something even the most avoidant person can't ignore forever. So let's begin by peeling back the layers of why silence is so magnetic to an avoidant, why it unsettles them, and how it quietly invites them to crave the very closeness they once ran away from. The first silent move is deceptively simple, but profoundly powerful. Stop explaining yourself. If you've ever been with an avoidant, you probably know this dance by heart. They pull away, they get distant, and your natural instinct is to lean in. You start writing long messages, explaining why you feel hurt, why you need more from them, why you deserve better. You pour out your heart, hoping that your words will finally reach them, that they'll finally understand and meet you halfway. But to an avoidant, those explanations don't land the way you hope. What feels like love to you often feels like pressure to them. They hear your words not as an invitation, but as an expectation. They don't think, oh, they care so much about me. Instead, they think, I can't give them what they want. This is too much. I need to retreat. And so the cycle continues. You explain, they retreat, and the connection feels even more unbalanced. But when you stop explaining, something shifts. Your silence becomes a new language they can't ignore. When you resist the urge to justify your feelings, you quietly communicate that you no longer need their validation to feel whole. That's unsettling for them, because in the past, they relied on your explanations to reassure them. Your chasing made them feel safe in their control. But when your silence replaces your paragraphs, when your calm replaces your defensiveness, when your stillness replaces your pleading, they're left with a question they can't shake. What changed? Imagine this. Instead of sending a long text trying to clarify what went wrong, you simply say, I hear you, and then go quiet. Instead of asking, did I do something wrong? Can we talk about it? You allow the silence to stretch. You're not angry, you're not dramatic, you're just not explaining anymore. That absence speaks volumes. It disrupts the pattern they've built their safety on. They're used to you fighting for closeness, used to you proving your love over and over. But now, you're no longer their emotional mirror. You're no longer handing them control over how you feel. And this triggers something new in them: curiosity, even fear. Because if you're not chasing, if you're not explaining, then maybe, just maybe, you're moving on. Maybe they pushed too far this time, and that quiet possibility unsettles them more than any words ever could. Here's the truth: explanations rarely change avoidant behavior. Silence, however, changes the dynamic, not because it manipulates them, but because it re-centers you. It's a declaration that your peace no longer depends on their approval. And when you embody that energy, calm, grounded, detached, it draws them closer in ways words never could. That's the first silent move. It's not about withholding love. It's about withdrawing from the exhausting cycle of over-explaining and returning to yourself. And when you do, the balance begins to shift. The second silent move is all about balance. Mirror their distance peacefully. When you're connected with an avoidant, there will almost always come a point where they begin to retreat. They take longer to reply. They cancel plans. They suddenly seem cold or unavailable. And what do most of us do in that moment? We panic. We react. We fire off anxious texts, demand clarity, or swing the other way into anger and resentment. We either chase them harder or punish them for pulling away. But here's the paradox. Both reactions feed right into the avoidance narrative. If you chase, they feel suffocated. If you lash out, they say, "See, this is why I don't get close." Either way, they retreat even further. That's why mirroring their distance, without hostility, is so powerful. It breaks the script. If they take hours to reply, you don't send frustrated follow-ups. You simply match their pace. If they become colder, you don't try to warm them up with extra affection. You remain steady, calm, and quietly pull back just as much as they do. But here's the key. You don't do it with bitterness, and you don't announce it like a punishment. You don't say, "Fine, I won't bother you anymore." You don't post cryptic quotes about walking away. You just shift your energy, quietly and gracefully, as if you're adjusting the volume on a dial. That subtle change unsettles them, because it's not what they expect. Avoidants are used to one of two patterns: someone clinging harder or someone exploding in frustration. But your calm mirroring, that doesn't fit the script. It leaves them wondering, why aren't they reacting? Why aren't they chasing? Why aren't they angry? And in that wondering, the power dynamic begins to flip. Think about it this way. Avoidants thrive on having the upper hand. They pull away because deep down, they know you'll compensate. You'll bridge the distance. You'll make sure the bond stays alive. But when you no longer play that role, when your energy quietly mirrors theirs instead, they start to feel something they've worked so hard to avoid: uncertainty. And here's where the beauty lies. By mirroring their distance peacefully, you protect your peace. You stop bleeding energy into a cycle that only drains you. You stop handing over your emotional power. You're not trying to hurt them. You're simply choosing not to hurt yourself anymore. And in that calm withdrawal, you become magnetic. Because avoidants may resist closeness, but they're also deeply sensitive to whether they still matter to you. And when they sense that your care is no longer guaranteed, that your presence is no longer unconditional, it awakens something in them that chasing never could. This is not about manipulation. It's about boundaries. It's about showing, without words, that your life doesn't orbit around their distance, that you can mirror without malice, detach without drama, and choose peace over panic. And that, more than anything, makes them wonder if they've underestimated you. The third silent move is simple but incredibly powerful. Be unreachable at times. One of the hidden comforts for an avoidant is knowing you're always there, always emotionally waiting in the wings. They like the reassurance that no matter how far they pull back, they can wander right back into your life whenever they want, and you'll still be there, ready to respond. That safety net allows them to disappear without consequence. But here's the truth. When someone always knows you'll be available, they stop valuing your presence. This is why becoming unreachable, not as a game, but as a lifestyle shift, is so magnetic. It's not about ghosting them or trying to make them jealous. It's about actually living your life in a way that doesn't leave you on standby mode for anyone. Fill your schedule with things that matter to you. Immerse yourself in work that excites you, friendships that nourish you, hobbies that light you up, and self-care that restores you. When your life is genuinely full, you don't have to pretend to be unavailable. You actually are. Now imagine the avoidant reaching out with their usual casual "hey" text. Normally, you'd reply right away, eager to keep the connection alive. But this time, you don't. Not because you're trying to prove a point, but because you're busy, present, absorbed in something meaningful. And when you do reply later, your tone is calm, grounded, unbothered. That subtle shift sends a powerful message. You're no longer waiting around. You've reclaimed your rhythm. This unpredictability disrupts their illusion of control. They can no longer assume they're the center of your attention. They can no longer lean on the comfort of your instant availability. And suddenly, they start craving the very thing they once took for granted. Because avoidants are drawn to freedom, but they're unsettled by the idea that your freedom might exclude them. Think of it this way. Emotional availability is valuable precisely because it isn't guaranteed. When you stop offering yourself on demand, they begin to recognize that your presence is a choice, not an obligation. And that choice, when it's no longer automatic, becomes precious. This doesn't mean you play hard to get or pretend you're too busy when you're not. That kind of pretense is transparent, and avoidance will sense the game. The real magic happens when you truly cultivate a life so fulfilling that their presence or absence doesn't dictate your mood. Your happiness stops being dependent on their attention, and ironically, that's when their attention starts chasing you. So the silent move here isn't about shutting them out. It's about opening yourself up to your own life, your own passions, your own freedom. When you do that authentically, you become unreachable at times without effort. And in that natural distance, avoidants begin to feel something they rarely allow themselves to feel: the fear of losing access to someone who no longer waits for them. The fourth silent move is perhaps the most underestimated of all. Let your energy speak. Words can be dismissed, overanalyzed, or ignored, but energy, your emotional state, your presence, is something an avoidant always feels, even if they don't admit it. You've probably been there before. You say, "I'm fine," but inside you're anything but fine. Anxious, restless, waiting for a response, longing for closeness. And even without you saying it, the avoidant senses it. They may not know how to articulate it, but they feel the pull, the expectation, the subtle pressure beneath your words. And pressure to them always signals danger. This is why cultivating emotional stillness is so magnetic. Imagine being with them, and instead of radiating need, you radiate calm. Instead of buzzing with anxious energy, you are present in yourself, rooted, clear, and grounded. You greet them warmly, yes, but without that hidden undertone of, "Please reassure me." You smile not because you're trying to win them back, but because you're simply at peace with yourself. That kind of energy is irresistible because it's rare. Here's the paradox. Avoidants are often drawn to people who feel emotionally self-contained. It makes them feel safer, less pressured, less like they'll be swallowed whole by someone else's needs. And when you embody that energy, still, steady, sovereign, they can sense the difference. You're no longer outsourcing your peace to their behavior. You're no longer tethered to whether they text back, pull away, or draw close. You carry yourself in a way that says, "I am whole, with or without you." And that shift doesn't just change how they perceive you, it changes how you perceive yourself. You stop needing them to validate your worth, and that creates a natural magnetism. Because what avoidants secretly crave, beneath all their defenses, is someone they can feel safe with. Someone who won't collapse into them, but also won't punish them. Someone who simply stands steady in their own center. Think of it like this. If your words say, "I don't need you," but your energy screams, "Please don't leave me," they will feel the contradiction. But if both your words and your energy align in stillness, if you truly believe you are enough as you are, that coherence becomes magnetic. They lean in, not because you're chasing, but because your calm becomes the anchor they didn't even realize they wanted. So the silent move isn't about ignoring them or pretending you don't care. It's about embodying a state of being that says, "I care for myself first, and anything you bring into my life is a bonus, not a lifeline." That's the energy that speaks volumes. That's the energy that makes them crave closeness, even while they try to resist it. The fifth silent move is counterintuitive, especially for kind, empathetic people. Stop trying to understand them. If you've been with an avoidant, you've probably done this countless times. You've read about their childhood wounds. You've tried to decode their silences. You've told yourself that if you could just understand their trauma better, you could finally love them the right way. It feels compassionate. It feels like care. But what it really does is keep you tied to them in a one-sided way. Avoidants get used to being studied. They get used to being the mystery, the puzzle you're always trying to solve. And on some level, this gives them comfort. It means they don't have to meet you halfway. They don't have to explain themselves, open up, or take responsibility, because you're already doing all the emotional labor for them. So here's the silent move. Put down the microscope. Stop analyzing. Stop explaining their behavior to yourself. And especially stop explaining it to them. Let their actions speak for themselves. If they withdraw, accept it as withdrawal, not as a riddle you must decode. If they shut down, accept it as a shutdown, not as a test you need to pass. Ironically, when you stop trying to understand them, something unexpected happens. They start to wonder about you. For the first time, the focus isn't on them. It's on your silence, your shift, your refusal to keep playing the same role. They may start asking questions they never asked before. Are you okay? What's going on with you? Did something change? This reversal unsettles them because avoidants are used to being in control of the narrative. When you step out of that cycle, when you stop chasing explanations, you create a gap they can feel. And sometimes that gap awakens their curiosity, or even their fear of truly losing you. But here's the deeper truth. This isn't about manipulating them into caring. It's about reclaiming your own peace, because the more you analyze them, the more you lose yourself. And the more you release the need to understand, the more space you free up for your own healing, your own clarity, your own life. So the silent move isn't coldness. It's freedom. It's choosing to stop carrying the burden of their behavior on your shoulders. It's quietly saying, "I don't need to understand you to know what I deserve." That is the kind of quiet power that shifts everything. The sixth silent move is small in action, but massive in impact. Say no without explaining. If you've been with an avoidant, you probably know how often they test boundaries. They'll cancel plans last minute. They'll send half-hearted messages to see if you'll still respond. They'll disappear, then reappear, expecting you to welcome them back without question. And if you're someone who loves deeply, your instinct is to tolerate it, to explain why you're hurt, to justify why you can't keep putting up with it, to spell out your boundaries in detail. But here's the truth. Explanations aren't boundaries. Explanations are negotiations. And avoidants are masters at slipping through negotiations. So the silent move is this. Just say no. Not with anger, not with drama, not with a 5-paragraph essay about how they made you feel. Just no. When they text you at midnight asking to hang out, and you're already in bed, you simply say, "Not tonight." When they try to start a shallow conversation after days of silence, you respond with calm distance, or not at all. When they test how much of your time and energy you'll give, you quietly protect your peace. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to soften it. You don't have to prove you're still a good, loving person. Your number is enough. And here's why this works. Avoidants are used to your yes. They're used to you bending, flexing, over-explaining, trying to prove that you're understanding. So when your no comes without explanation, it shakes them. It draws a line they can't move. It forces them to feel the boundary instead of debating it. But more importantly, this silent move isn't for them. It's for you. Every time you say no without explaining, you reclaim a little piece of yourself. You remind yourself that you don't need anyone's permission to honor your own needs, that your peace is worth protecting, even if it disappoints someone else. And here's the paradox. When you say no without guilt, you become even more magnetic. Because suddenly, you're not the person they can take for granted. You're the person they have to respect or lose. And that shift in energy is something no words could ever create. The seventh and final silent move is the one that ties everything together. Choose stillness over reaction. Avoidants thrive on emotional chaos. When they pull away, when they go silent, when they push your buttons, it's not always intentional, but it gives them a sense of control. They've learned that closeness feels overwhelming and distance feels safer. And every time you react, whether it's with anger, panic, or desperate chasing, it reinforces their belief that intimacy equals drama. But imagine this instead. They ghost you for 3 days. You don't blow up their phone. You don't send long texts demanding answers. You don't post cryptic quotes on social media hoping they'll notice. You stay still, calm, grounded in your own life. That stillness is unsettling to them because it's not what they expect. They expect fireworks. Your reaction feeding the push-pull cycle they know so well. But when your energy doesn't rise and fall with their behavior, the control they once had evaporates. Stillness doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've reclaimed your power. You're no longer outsourcing your peace to their actions. You're no longer defining your worth by whether they come close or pull away. And here's the beauty of stillness. It's magnetic. It draws people in because it creates space. Space for them to feel their own emotions instead of being distracted by yours. Space for them to notice your absence, your calm, your independence. Space for them to realize that if they want your attention, they have to step up, not just step in and out. Stillness is not passive. It's active self-control. It's choosing not to react to every trigger. It's choosing your peace over their chaos. And in that silence, they begin to feel something they can't ignore, the loss of the emotional power they once held over you. This is the final shift. When you stop explaining, stop chasing, stop justifying, stop overreacting, you become someone they can no longer control. And in that space, something incredible happens. You glow differently. You stand taller. You live freer. And that's when avoidants, who once pushed you away, begin to crave you the most. But here's the truth. By the time you master this stillness, you won't need their craving anymore, because you'll have found something stronger, steadier, and more beautiful than their attention. You'll have found your own peace.